Welcome all to Legal Tech Week for January 12th, 2024. This is the show where every week we get together and talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation. I'm Bob Ambrogi. I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. And our panelists today, starting Nikki, you want to kick it off with your introduction?
I'll do my best. I've been struggling here since we started. My name is Nikki Black. I am the head of SME and external education in my case and LawPay. I write legal tech columns for Above the Law, ABA Journal, and the Daily Record, and I also oversee and write our benchmark reports and our legal industry report on my case and LawPay side of things, and I'm looking forward to diving in today.
Right, and Joe.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast. I am super excited to be here again because I get to talk about my favorite topic, how everybody else in the world seems a year behind on technology.
Well, we're glad to have you back again. Stephanie.
Hello, I'm Stephanie Wilkins. I'm the editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM, and I'm excited to have a reason for one whole hour to stop thinking about Legal Week or the predictions that I am drowning in from everyone in the industry.
We're going to call you to task next year. I think we're going to have to go back and go through all these predictions and see how they do. But
yeah,
trouble with predictions, right?
Well, if I think about that now, that'll be easier than if I think about it right before I would need to do it. So thank you.
All right, and Steve.
Hey, Steve Embry here. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads about legal innovation and legal technology.
Well, maybe Steve, you could kick us off only because you are fresh back from an actual conference that none of us went to, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, which is not a legal tech conference, but a tech conference with some interesting stuff going on.
Right. Yeah, I just got back from spending a week with 50,000 of my closest friends crammed together in small spaces, long lines, and bars and restaurants. So
sounds like the disco party.
So probably in a couple of days I won't be able to talk or breathe. But no, it was, I go every year, and it's always a good time. There's always a lot of new insights. It's become a little bit more of a production, I noticed this year. A lot of the keynotes were sort of bragging about stuff as opposed to talking about innovation and approaches and problem solving, although there was some of that. But the big exhibitors, the Samsungs and the LGs, seem to be taking over more and more and more of the exhibit space. And when you have to stand in line to get into a exhibitor's space on the floor, to me, it's like, I think this is a little much, guys. Just to look at phones that you already could see at Best Buy. But there's always some stuff pertaining to legal and which will influence legal. And I've been writing a series of articles for Above the Law for what I saw this week from, all sorts of different things. It's I always feel funny when I come back from it because I see all these articles that people talk about all these great big announcements at CES, and I'm going like my big announcement was the startup that's created music just to calm dogs down and alleviate their stress. I missed all these other cool things, but it's kind of to be expected because it's really spread out from one end of Las Vegas to the other. And was telling Bob before we started, you just have to kind of pick your spots. You can't go to 2 different venues in one day and expect to accomplish anything. But it's because, as anybody that's been to Las Vegas knows, getting it from point A to point B in Las Vegas, even if it's a quarter of a mile, can take you, 10 times longer than you think it will. So anyway, I've put a series of stories about the laws, been publishing them, and yeah, it was a good time. I'd recommend it. I'd recommend it for anybody because it is enlightening, to talk to these guys who don't have the sort of legal mindset that we all kind of deal with in the shows that we go to. I mean, they're not looking for ways not to do things as much as they're looking for ways to push the envelope and come up with new stuff. And their mindset's just a lot different. And it's fun talking to them. And I would say 60 to 70% of the stuff that comes out and they talk about it at CES never happens. But that's okay because it's at least somebody's thinking of something that could happen and could be developed. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun. Hopefully I'll be back again next year if I can survive it all.
Yeah, it's one of those things where every time I hear you talk about it, I think, okay, I'm going to go to that next year, and then next year comes around and I totally forgot about it, and I don't go there. But one of these days I'm going to go there, I think. But
Yeah.
I love reading
a
about
lot
it.
of surprises.
I've been reading all the stories coming out in the tech periodicals about all the weird little things being unveiled there. The one that I thought was really funny because, I mean, pretty much going back to when I used to read Popular Mechanics or whatever things were, that we were talking about flying cars, and like one of the big items this year was apparently a flying car that was there. Did you just happen to see that one?
Oh yeah. They've come out with that sort of periodically. That's not the first time that's the George Jetson flying cars have been on the exhibit floor. One of the things that was kind of funny and it was kind of different. Before I went, I read all the press about it's all going to be about generative AI and blah 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 blah, and it's huge. That's all they're going to talk about. And yeah, I mean, it was talked about a lot, but like not as much as like the legal tech vendors are talking about it at the shows we go to. It was more, this is what this product will do. As opposed to look at generative AI and what it's going to revolutionize with all of our products, and this will do this, and this. It was more, this is backed by generative AI, but let me tell you what we can do with this, which was kind of interesting. And then, I went to a startup pitch kind of thing, and they had 10 startups that pitched different products. 9 of them had virtually nothing to do with generative AI. They were just all sorts of, vacuum pumps for food and the dog music and all these different things. One guy pitched generative AI, and it was something that was going to summarize market research that you could use if you wanted to find out what your competitors were doing. And listen to this going like, didn't already do this? Isn't that what Chat GPT does if you just ask it? So it made me think, it sounded very familiar to a lot of our legal tech presentations. Like, look at generative AI and what it's going to do. Woo! It's like, well, yeah, that's what it's going to do. We know that.
There was a generative AI backyard grill. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
It was like
Is it like
perfect steaks or something.
$3,500 or something? Like, yeah.
Yeah. It is really it's funny because I mean, of the exhibit space, God, I bet over half of it was devoted to automotive, self-driving cars or people supplying parts to self-driving cars. Big chunks of it to appliances and cooking. I mean, you could walk through the exhibit floor and there'd be all these booths where they were cooking steak or grilling this or grilling that, and it was it's consumer technology in a very broad sense, that's for sure.
I've always really wanted to check it out. As much as I hate Vegas, I've always thought it just sounded really, I don't know. I want to see the wacky stuff. Maybe that's why I'm never going to go for work or anything. I just want to see the really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to take a field trip one year. Legal Tech Week field trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, since
there's certainly a large share of wacky
stuff, they can send us all there next year. And
Yeah,
are there
have to
good
talk to
parties there?
have to talk to Joe's team about this. What good parties? Yeah, but the problem is, like, you start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and everything runs like till 6 o'clock at night, and like I'm just worn out by then. Plus,
Yeah.
you go to these parties, like when we go to the parties, we all sort of, at least we know each other, but you go to the parties at CES, like, I don't know any of these people, and so, and it's, they're a lot of them are, really very technically oriented. They're coders and that sort of thing. And like, so what am I going to talk about other than to reveal how little I know about coding? I could do that pretty easily.
God forbid I should have to
so,
talk about
so
technology.
You can point
probably
out all
miss
the
most of
potential liabilities in a given room. You can be like, that chandelier could fall on your head. You'd be really popular, I think.
Yeah, that would be really popular with this group. Yes, I can see I would really advance my my stature.
Well, that's why we need a field trip. If we all go as a unified force, they'll
Yeah,
realize
there
they're
you
missing
go.
out on something.
I mean, that
We need to
happens
find a
when you go to
sponsor.
events outside of legal and you tell people you're a lawyer, then what? They all start lining up to ask you their legal questions,
Shudder.
right?
No, it's more like they all start moving away from you very quickly. It's like parting the Red Sea or something.
It depends on the status of their paternity case or criminal prosecution or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll start planning that. Start planning that field trip for next year. Meanwhile, in breaking news today, a new study has come out with some really urgent news that we all need to know about generative AI. I think, and Joe, I think you've got the scoop on that.
Yeah. Do we have the ticker sound effect? Like did it, or this is very new. Multiple outlets from Bloomberg, The Hill, the Register, all of them reporting about a new study from Stanford. Did you know? Brace yourselves. Generative AI can make mistakes when it's asked legal questions. I mean, I don't know where else to go with that.
Shocked.
Yeah,
You
I
can say.
mean, it's horrifying. Yeah, I mean, there's been no indication over the course of the last year that might be possible. There have been no sanctions or license suspensions or the president's former lawyer getting in trouble for it. Like it just comes right out of the blue. Um, so kidding aside, the mainstream media is reporting on this. It is as though it's some sort of breathless new revelation is stupid. The Stanford study itself is interesting. I don't think that the authors would necessarily have given it the headline that all of these mainstream media did. I think they viewed it much more as an opportunity to get some raw numbers on things that we already knew happened. But still, it's interesting, and I think that actual engineers can use it for future development. But it's incredibly backward looking. Like they test 3.5. Obviously that's not even really where we are anymore. It's said that and it's testing the consumer facing versions, which obviously we all know those suck, and that you have to have the versions that are specifically tailored to legal. And we've all written about how those ones that are now tailored to legal have more or less moved on from the hallucination problem and are concentrating on accuracy issues, as far as once you have real cases, how do you make sure you're getting the right answer out of them? That said, the more I thought about it, the more I softened a bit, and it said that there is something to be said for the mainstream media reporting it this way, because while the lawyers, one would hope, are all going to move on to these legally tailored products, the pro se litigants, the people who just not even like they're pro se, they just have a legal problem and don't have the wherewithal to hire a lawyer, and they think they can negotiate themselves out of it even. Those folks are the folks that are at risk in some ways. And so the more we can, even though we as legal folks know there are better tools that actually work, maybe it is worth it to blare this out every couple of months so that normal folks, the normies out there, know that they can't use this to solve their legal problems.
So I didn't get all the way through it. Was the rationale for testing GPT 3.5 and not 4 the fact that that's the one that's free, or am I just trying to give them more credit than they deserve?
So I think it's because it's the one that's free.
Okay.
Because I think fundamentally they operated on the logic, and it was weird to me. I think they were operating on the logic that they wanted to test what a random person might be able to access, which sure. But they have lines where they're like, this raises questions whether large language models can do anything for legal. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. It it proves that you can't do it with you don't work with it. But like the model isn't the one at fault here. Like the large language model's fine. Like the you can put this is a racing thing. You can put the same engine in a bunch of race cars and they get different results. It depends on what you got around it. So
I mean, it's part of the, again, in terms of sort of softening on the study, because when I first heard about it, I had the kind of the same reaction, and then I think one of the maybe striking findings out of the study is just the extent of hallucination in legal queries against these large language models. I mean, again, looking at the headline of it, it's 69 to 88% hallucination rate in response to legal queries for these large language models. I mean, I do think that's probably a worse picture than most of us have kind of anticipated in terms of using these models for legal queries. But again, I suppose I haven't read the study itself, so I suppose it also depends on what kinds of queries they're putting to it and how they're using it and what they're asking it. And I think I just saw some references to asking them to compare cases and ask them to contrast cases and that sort of thing. And that's not the kind of thing an average consumer is going to be doing all that much, I don't think.
right. And one of the things that it noted, which it probably doesn't shock any of us, is it's a lot better at understanding the Supreme Court than it is at understanding random district courts. It's more likely to make up stuff in a Iowa district court than it is the Southern District of New York. Things like that, because it's being trained on what's newsworthy, and that's gonna, have those sorts of issues. So it does mean that
I was getting ready to say that, I do better at understanding the Supreme Court than the lower district courts. But then I thought that's really not true anymore either. So
yeah. I mean, look, a normal person trying to solve their own legal problem on their own is most likely not going to need to know what Supreme Court precedent is, and is very likely to need to know what the Iowa Circuit, the Polk County, whatever circuit court says, and that's going to be a thing that those are going to screw up pretty badly.
So while we're talking about hallucinations, do you want to quickly talk about your other story as well?
My other story was it wasn't really a tech story, but I morphed it into one. So there was a story. This one actually came from the ABA journals where I saw it, but Victor's not here, so we'll go ahead and steal this. The story is that there was a lawyer in Seattle who tried to slip a fake news article into a case. He's basically saying, Exxon is, I think it was Chevron. Chevron is really going to screw us over with this arbitration award. Here, see this article from the Saudi Sun about it. But the article was made up. It was just he said a hypothetical of how they could screw over the people. It's bad. It's going to cost him. That's whatever. So he did that on purpose, by all accounts. However, it got me thinking that we talk a lot about solving the hallucination problem for case law, but there's so many other intersections in legal where you use stuff that is not case law, where you could very easily have hallucinated stuff. For instance, just from my own background as a white collar defense person. So I could totally see a scenario where the SEC calls you up, says, we need you to defend how much corporate money you're spending on a security detail for your CEO. And you have to compile a presentation. You use a lot of news articles about like other comparable CEOs who have been kidnapped or whatever, and you put that together, that, that's the sort of thing that I can easily see somebody saying, get me all the news articles of CEOs who've been kidnapped, and some junior associate types that in, and a bunch of fake articles get created because that's what this thing does. And then, you've lied to the government about it. And that's just one of those instances where we think we've got a cap on this case law issue, which is obviously very, very important in litigation. But there's a lot of other places in law where you use non-case law sources that people should still be cognizant of. And that was that one.
Yeah, I just put a link into Judge Schlegel's deep fake site where he kind of talks about a little bit of that. I mean, it's, it's as Stephanie says, legal tech adjacent, I guess, a little bit in terms of some of the possible uses for made up stuff in courtroom and litigation legal settings.
I like legal tech adjacent. It's fine.
That's good. Well, yeah, we'll we'll somehow recruit CES into being a legal tech adjacent conference that we can.
Something in there has to be used for legal.
Something has to be illegal.
I'll
Or
pitch
illegal.
that to. I'll
Or
pitch
illegal.
to
That
the
works too.
I'll pitch it to the Consumer Technology Association and see if they'll be willing to.
Yeah.
Right. You want a what? Who are you again?
So from hallucinations hallucinated and not so hallucinated, where do we go from there? How about exploding emojis heads or something?
Yeah, that'd be me.
Well, not literally, but yeah.
I didn't submit my Daily Record article to talk about today because it was just resources for lawyers to learn about generative AI, and I figured everybody here and everybody that attends this already knows where to learn about it. So I decided to submit some articles that other people had written, and one that I thought was interesting was this article where it was about a judge. It was about a judge's opinion where the judge used an exploding head emoji in the opinion, like in issuing his ruling. And like the basics, essentially the claim had to do, it has something to do with billing and that whether text messages were billed at an improper rate to the client. I didn't really, and it was judicial approval of attorney's fees. And so they didn't get approval, and the judge criticized them for their billing 0.17 for every single text that was sent. And the judge said, well, it's possible they could perseverate over text for 10 minutes, carefully wordsmithing the message. There's no evidence here that happened, essentially, because the responses were things like confirmed at 35% or okay, thanks, I'll let you know. And the judge is like, how hard was it to come up with that? And so then, and what I thought was ironic was then the judge said, tallying up the texting charges, they exceeded a mind-blowing $750, invokes another emoji, and he put the exploding head emoji in his opinion. And first of all, I thought that was interesting because he was sarcastically critiquing their emojis. I get that he was doing this ironically, but critiquing their and charging for text based upon the fact that they weren't wordsmithing anything. And so rather than wordsmith in his own opinion, he does what is apparently, according to Eric Goldman, and I'll trust him, the guy who wrote the post, the first time this has happened that he's aware of, puts an emoji in his ruling, the exploding head emoji, which I think it's funny, but that's really unprofessional. Like, I feel like judges and judicial opinions are supposed to be very precise. You're supposed to wordsmith the opinion or the decision that you're issuing. You're not supposed to use an emoji. And then, as Eric rightly points out, the meaning of emojis changes rapidly over time. Like, I can't keep up with my Gen Z kids' use of emojis. Like when you put up a skull, this is the response to something funny. It means I'm dead, which means I think that's so funny I died. Like, and I'm still trying to keep up with all the stuff that they send me and understand what they're doing. And it changes all the time. The expressions change, and then the emojis will change to keep up with the slang that they're using. And so I 100% agree with him that this emoji may mean something very different, especially something violent like a head exploding. Like over time, it may evolve into something else and therefore make the judicial opinion less clear. You know, it's going to muddy the judge's opinion on this, the judge's holdings. So I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was notable that a judge actually included that in their conclusion. But I hope that that's not a trend that sticks around, because it doesn't seem very wise to me to do that on a regular basis.
Did he use the emoji to balance out his use of words like perseverate?
I don't know, but it's a good question. Who knows? But I thought it was kind of like, why would you do this as a judge? Why? I know, I think he must think it's funny, but why would you do that in a judicial ruling? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't like it. I object.
And it even depends on who's reading the opinion, right? Because certain emojis mean something to Gen Z, that they might mean something entirely different to boomers or some other generation. So
Yeah,
use plain English, I guess.
And I feel like we talked about it before in here. It's the whole story behind the gun emoji, right? How one operating system changed it to a water gun before another one had, so it meant different things. So like if you send a text saying like meet me in the park with that emoji, if one's a water gun and one's not, it's very different meanings. Like, so I don't even know the extent to which they render differently on different operating systems now too. But people should use words if they really want to convey ideas that are important.
Especially if it's a judge. I mean, come on, isn't like analysis and your conclusions are your art form, if you will. Like, that's literally what you're supposed to be doing. So even though you may think it's funny, I think it was completely inappropriate. Shouldn't have done that. Makes me angry. I don't have much to be angry about, I guess, but
Okay, boomer.
right?
Thumbs up to that. Oh, wait, that's not a good emoji to use anymore, right?
I did have another story we could talk about later that I just thought was notable, like some jacket.
Keep us in suspense.
All right, fine. It was just I mean, it's a short ABA journal story that I thought was notable, basically just about some paralegals along with a North Carolina Justice for All project filing suit claiming that the ban on unauthorized practice of law is unconstitutional as applied to their pure legal advice on filling out court-created legal forms for common legal issues. And so I just thought it was a notable tactic to try to increase, to reduce unauthorized practice, the bans on unauthorized practice of law in most states. And I feel like it's indicative of, first, of a trend in legal, like we're seeing multiple ways of trying to sort of attack those or approach those bans or regulatory sandboxes or whatever. But also I feel like it almost, and I can't think of some specific examples off the top of my head outside of legal, but I feel like there's sort of a trend of people trying to sort of, it's like something that's happening in our culture right now where people are trying to get in on what the professionals are doing or take things up so that there's more access to things for the common person who doesn't have the necessary knowledge. And this is something I clearly didn't flesh out, but as I read it, I felt like it was sort of evidence of a trend of things I've been seeing, but I cannot enunciate or provide you with any examples of the things I've seen outside of legal. So it's not a very helpful commentary, but I think it's something to watch. So there.
Well, there was wasn't there, what was the Florida First Amendment case? Was it dentists or something over professional licensing a couple of years ago, where there was some chat, I can't remember I have no idea what I'm talking about. There was a case in Florida where there was some professional group like accountants or dentists or something that were challenging the licensing laws on First Amendment grounds, and in a similar way. I mean, I think I'd want a licensed dentist. I don't know. But
something that brings the writer's strike to mind for me, and I have no idea why. And I think there's some sort of analogy there, but we can't access it, and I don't know why that makes me think of this. And so I think it may just be the wiring in my brain crossing, but I'll have to give that some thought.
There was that flurry of lawsuits against state bar associations for spending money on various causes, and the individual members were saying it's a violation of their freedom of expression because you had to join the bar to practice law. And I don't know what, there were several of those cases. I don't know whatever happened to them. I guess there was a ruling one way or the other, but I don't recall.
We're all firing really strong here today. We're all like, it was something like this. I can't remember.
Well,
We're just hallucinating ourselves right now. We're like,
it's
isn't it a
well,
thing
it's
when
terrible.
China
It's
like
actually
this?
terrible because I saw that North Carolina the lawsuit, and I've been meaning to kind of dig into it because I first of all I thought maybe this night might not even be the first legal one in the legal world on a First Amendment ground. So I'm not sure about that, but I did also see something somebody posted on LinkedIn today related to that North Carolina case, also analogizing it to like accounting and some liberalization that's been happening in the accounting field, or some attempts at liberalization of licensing in the accounting field. So I think you're definitely onto something. This is not just legal, but I do think that the legal profession has been somewhat notorious for trying to clamp down on any effort to encroach on licensing. I mean, it's gotten a little bit better over the last few years, but I mean, we all saw, all the lawsuits against, LegalZoom and Rocket Lawyer and Avo back in the day when they were trying to do some really interesting stuff, and any number of lawsuits were to try and shut them down and keep them from doing that, and that's continued to be a problem. I mean, maybe that's why we hear so much about it in legal, is because lawyers file suits and we hear about it.
I think what it is, I think now that I'm fleshing this out in my head a little bit, I think what it is for me is it's this idea of like sort of capitalism almost in the midst of a collapse here, because you've got such a gap between the haves and the have-nots right now. And there's all these theories that there's going to be like a revolution, and because the haves have so much and nobody else has anything. And so, the working class is going to rise up. So I think that's why it makes me think a little bit of like the writers' strike, and just sort of like frustration with Hollywood and paying all the people at the top a lot of money, but the people that are actually making the content are getting screwed. And then, I feel like paralegals, we all know that they do so much work in law firms. They make no money. My husband's a nurse. Mary brought up in chat, the nurses get paid horribly. I mean, he literally was like there from day one in COVID. He's an ICU nurse. Like, he works a ton and he does not get compensated, right? So there's all these people that are the working class, for lack of a better word, when it comes to that type of thing, that are just, I feel like it's this evidence of like bubbling, like this bubbling discontent, malcontent. And it's just that's an evidence of it happening in our own sphere, but I think it's just like sort of happening everywhere. And I think that's more what I was thinking, and I wasn't able to really clearly state right previously.
Just as further evidence of that, I heard today that Tim Cook's compensation last year was $63 million, and the median salary paid to a person working at Apple last year was $90,000. That's a bit of a gap.
Right.
I mean,
It's
I thought to myself when I heard that, like, what would you do with $63 million? I mean, you're running the biggest company on the planet. You have no time to do anything else. What are you going to spend your $63 million on?
An extra yacht or two.
No, they're like buying islands. I read that Zuckerberg on his island or something has Wagyu beef that are being raised. So then when he goes and lives on his island in the apocalypse, he's gonna have really good beef available to him. Like, come on, this is what they're spending their money on. It's outrageous. Unbelievable. They have helicopters with like set to go, like to take them to these islands once the proletariat or whatever, the ruling class rises up, and and so they all are just gonna like escape to their little islands or else escape off the earth. Like, that's what they're spending their money on. It's unbelievable. Nuts. I'll hop off my podium now. The end.
The David Latt's column today, I think it was, or something, talked about the salaries of the top general counsel in the country.
Yeah.
What was it like? I mean, I think they were all up like $28 million, something like that. In not just I shouldn't say salary, total compensation packages, but just bizarre amounts of money. And one of them, I think the third highest one, was like the general counsel of Zoom, and I was thinking, I was just on a call with a Zoom sales representative last week, haggling over what I pay for this webinar subscription, trying to get them to continue this nice little rate I've had for a while. And I'm thinking, here they are haggling over a few bucks with Zoom while their general counsel is getting $28 million. So maybe I should call him.
I guess we should let everybody know that, collectively, those of us in this call are easily worth $50,000.
I'm on board.
But we do accept bribes. So
Right. We're looking to make our 63 million next year. This year.
we're working on it. We'd
Fund
like
our
to
field trip
advertise on Legal Tech Week.
to fund our field
Now's your
trip to Las
chance.
Vegas.
Fund our field trip to. No, that's what we could revive the old. We could like get Jessie to take us in her RV and take us around the country, and we could just do episodes from every city in the country. Legal Tech Week on the road.
The road show.
Road show. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sounds
Get a
good.
nice big one of those big RVs with.
I feel like
a
we'd
couple
hate
of-
each other by the end of it. This whole thing would implode.
We don't
No,
know.
we wouldn't hate each other. You're right. Probably after about a week, we would have had enough. Have you ever sailed on a small boat with people who are kind of semi-strangers or something, and you find out by the end of the week just how hard it is to spend a week cooped up in a small space with a stranger?
Sounds like torture.
All right. Well, from strangers to
There's no transition off that one.
what are we going to talk about? Stephanie, how about some impromptu what am I trying to say? Recordings that were not intended to happen.
Yeah, it's my favorite theme of lawyers behaving badly with technology. I mean, I love it so much that I proposed a Legal Week panel that I am now moderating on. It's not a tech problem, it's a you problem. This one, it was one of our other publications wrote it. I didn't even really notice it. So I was like, that seems weird. Basically, it was some people who had it was an online hearing or trial and so they were showing the witness and exhibit the other way. They were showing the witness and exhibit, and it was one of the ones where they had to like manipulate a mouse to show. It was like a slip and fall case, like where did you fall? Show us in this picture. And the witness couldn't figure out how to use the tech or whatever, so they recessed and let the lawyer show them how to use the tech with like strict warnings of don't coach your client during this time, don't coach your client. And the guy left his mic on, and sure enough, when he was showing the guy how to use the thing, he was like, yeah, so you just move the mouse like right here to show them where you fell. And the other opposing counsel was still on and heard it all. So he said again, he wasn't supposed to coach his client, and it resulted in a mistrial just because people are dumb. End of story. That's just my ongoing, why can't lawyers have nice things? I don't know.
Yeah, and figure out Zoom mics and stuff like that. And happened to happen in a week when Chris Christie was in the news for his hot mic little error, and everybody saw that. But after I guess it was right after he announced that he was withdrawing from the race, he forgot that he had a mic on and continued to go on about the other Republican candidates and say some choice words.
But I mean, yeah, I think one of the reasons I also picked it was that just like, I guess there is the bigger, people somehow still don't realize that virtual hearings and things are the same as real hearings. And you just because you're not in a courtroom, you doesn't mean you can now suddenly do things you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, right. They take a more relaxed attitude to the whole thing and don't take it as seriously.
Well, I mean, people in actual, like, I don't know how many of you are on TikTok, but one of the trending things last week was the guy who leaped over the judge issued was about to sentence somebody who leaped over the bench. I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
And like into the air, like he went probably 10 feet into the air and like landed on the judge, and there was like chaos. But then there was like a whole series of videos that followed it where they just showed random people leaping into this guy practicing, because it was quite the athletic feat that he accomplished there. But
oh yeah, no, the sequel to The Longest Yard or whatever is going to be great. He's ready to go.
But I feel like people and even here in Rochester, there was news that there was just like They had to arrest people at sentencing, like family members, someone that got sentenced. I feel like it's this extension of what's happening on planes. It's just like a free for all, online and off at this point. Everyone's just losing it and not following typical decorum. The
As long as we're on
simulation's
the
coming to an end.
As long as we're on the people are dumb subject, I would strongly recommend, if you haven't seen Joanna Stern's video interview of the guy in jail who was stealing the iPhones and passwords. I mean, it's a really instructive video. What this guy would do, he'd go to bars, particularly with college students, and he'd start chatting them up a little bit, and then he'd say, I've got some drugs for sale, or I can, I'm a rapper, and here's my Instagram. And if you give me your phone, I'll plug in my contact information.
Steve,
So
I cannot tell the difference between you and a drug dealer, Steve, with that language. It's just so realistic. I've got some
so
drugs for sale. Would you like them?
Yeah, they'd plug in their password, which he would, carefully record. Then he'd take their phone, and, plug his contact in, and then his buddy would distract him. He'd steal the phone. So now he's got the password and he's got the phone, and it's ball game over. Everything's, So they asked him, how much last year do you think you earned doing this? And he said, oh, I don't know, maybe $1.5 million. I don't know, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Like people are dumb. Right? Oh yeah, here's my phone, here's my password. But it's a cool video. I would Jeff Richardson at iPhone JD mentioned it in his thing. I watched it. It really is interesting.
All right, I'll check that out. Well, I had put down a couple of stories to talk about this week. One was the sort of the Carta mess that's been all over the news, which is, I don't know, maybe that's legal tech adjacent too. Carta is a sort of a legal tech company, maybe not. But maybe since we seem a little hungry for legal tech companies, I'll talk a little bit about the Agiloft thing, which I think probably, I'm sure some of you guys wrote about. But I thought it was kind of interesting. And Caroline and I actually kind of previewed this last week on the show when we were both talking about a demo we had just had, and I'm sure others of you probably had the same demo. But it was funny only because the Agiloft is a contract lifecycle management platform, and they said, we want to show you our new AI driven contract review capability, and to which I kind of said, well, didn't you already have an AI driven contract review capability? And well, like, that was the old AI. This is the generative AI one. And so I was a little bit skeptical going into it. But I actually thought it was kind of cool. It's, again, like a lot of these generative AI applications we've seen, it's sort of not necessarily a huge leap forward, but it's a nice sort of small step forward that shows where this technology can go. And what it does is just attack the problem of the sort of the endless back and forth with redlining in contract negotiations. And what so many of these current software programs do is, your opposing party, the opposing counsel at the other company or whatever, sends you a contract draft, and then if you feed it into your AI, it says, well, your AI, your contracts playbook has this language, and so it picks up your language and dumps it in and creates a red line and sends it back to them. But really all you're doing is going from their extreme position to your extreme position and sort of not really getting all that much closer in the negotiations. And so what Agiloft's thing does is to kind of try and take their proposed clause and the kind of whatever your standard clause would be for that particular provision, and tries to bring them closer together, tries to come up with language that crafts some sort of a medium between the two extreme positions. And just based on the demo, I haven't used it, and it's always a little hard to know how much weight to put in a demo, because obviously they've thought about what they're going to be showing you, but it looked pretty good, and it looked like it was at least getting you a little bit closer. And I think they're straightforward, saying this isn't for every clause or every negotiation, but if you haven't, it's particularly useful for a longer, sort of more complex clause where it could be harder to reach agreement. If you're just talking about 30 days versus 60 days or something like that, then it doesn't really apply. So I thought that was worthy of note. And Stephanie, I don't know if you guys covered it. I didn't notice if you guys covered it as well this week or if you saw it at all, but I thought it was kind of nice.
Oh, the royal we did. I did not. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have no insights to share, unfortunately, at the moment.
Yeah. But it's it's one example of many of generative AI being put to I think practical uses in legal, and I hadn't really seen it before, and just in that sort of same incarnation in the contract space. So sure we'll be seeing a lot more of whatever in contract stuff and AI at Legal Week in a few weeks.
Yeah, the next 2 weeks are going to be a lot of announcements, I'm sure. It's been more quiet than I expected thus far leading up to Legal Week. I'm not even going to say I'm jinxing myself because I have no control over this. But
yeah, I haven't. I mean,
we
I'm
had
only
there
going to
was
be there.
the reveal announced generative AI stuff this week.
I saw your article. I didn't.
Yeah.
See that.
Again, the royal we covered that.
Yeah.
I've been very good at delegating in 2024.
I need a royal we to delegate to.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
I'm only going to be
Bob,
there really one full day of the conference. So
Bob, if you had gone to CES, you would have been able to find that little we that you could delegate things to. It's a little Samsung thing called Bally that runs around and
yeah, I saw that.
asks
Is that the little round
asks you how
one?
you're doing. Yeah, ask you how you're doing, how your day was, and all that sort
I
of
was
stuff.
interested in
It's
the
like a
AI-driven thing that
nice-
mixes cocktails for you. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I didn't see it, but I can
That's what
imagine.
I want to
I can
go
only
to.
imagine it.
Yes, these are the things I want to go to CES for.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Last year they had a cute little thing that looked just like a little dog. Do all the little doggy stuff for you that you want to buy a dog for, except you didn't have to let it out or groom it or feed it or just had to plug it in. But I guess that didn't count.
Yeah, but it's like what goes around comes around. Didn't Sony have one of those things out like 20 years ago or something?
Yeah.
What was that little thing? I forget what it was called.
Yeah, there was. I can picture it. I absolutely picture. I know exactly what you're talking about. The little robo dog thing.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is they just keep showing us all these cute little robots. Meanwhile, like, was it Hyundai who acquired Boston Dynamics? And you hear very little from Boston Dynamics all of a sudden with their like dog robots and their like the robots that have the human form. Have you seen the last video I looked up? It was like more athletic than any of us here, like by far, even at our prime, this thing. It was like doing like flips and walking up like a board that, a piece of wood. And like, it's terrifying. And the fact that we're not hearing anything about it and they're like infusing these things with generative AI capabilities. I'm rewatching Battlestar Galactica right now just to make sure that I am aware of what's coming.
I mean, Boston Dynamics, particularly their dogs, is the stuff of nightmares. Like, it's impressive
terrifying.
Technologically, but holy crap, that stuff is frightening.
Yeah.
The dogs are demonic, I swear.
And they're so agile. You know what I mean? With those four legs and the way that they move. And I mean, they're already using them like in military, like that. You're going to see it in like warfare. And that's where we start ending up with so many issues. And the police are buying them and terrifying. And we're not seeing videos of any of that, are we? No, that stuff's nowhere to be found.
The creepy super soldier dogs, no.
Yeah. So these cute robots are all just a ruse to keep the populace, appeased.
Well, after the proletariat revolution, we'll take control of all these robots.
We'll see.
I'm not entirely sure that all of you aren't robots, except for me.
A simulation. You guys are all, what are they, NPCs? It's my world, and you're all NPCs. Isn't that non-player?
Except for me is exactly what a robot would say, Steve.
Except for me. I am not a robot.
All right, we're not even legal tech adjacent anymore. We're just moving off into a whole other area.
I was gonna bring up the other story I almost shared, and I saw Mia ask the question about it. I almost brought up the New York Times suit against OpenAI, and I was curious, us all being in the journalism or journalism adjacent, whatever you want to call it, writing for a living realm, people had more thoughts on that one. It was interesting, like actually it feel like there's more to it. They get way deeper into the kind of prompts they put in, and they were basically trying to, you know, they were trying and successfully managing to bypass the paywall. And it was really, I mean, it's interesting. I can paste an article in here, but
Yeah. I mean, on a broad concept, it's really interesting to me because,
yeah,
you know, as any number of people have said about it is, you know, if you, in order to improve your intelligence, sit down and read the New York Times every day and read the Washington Post every day and read the Wall Street Journal every day and whatever. And out of that, you become more informed about the world and better able to answer questions and talk about politics or whatever, then you're clearly not violating anybody's copyright or doing anything inappropriate. That's exactly what those publications exist for. But if a large language model is reading these publications and simply getting, you know, smarter by doing that, then, you know, it's hard to, in a way, it's kind of hard to think of that as copyright infringement. On the other hand, if the large language model is really ingesting the text in a way that it's somehow capable of regurgitating it or reusing it in some very specific way, then it seems to be more problematic. There was the New York Times article also last week where they talked about you know, how they learned that if you prompt GPT certain ways, you can get it to spit out people's email addresses. And I
oh
think they
yeah,
used it with the New York Times reporters specifically, showing that it's in there somewhere and they're able to kind of get it out of there. So, you know, I think it's really, in a way, I think part of the problem is we still don't fully understand the black box of what's going on with ChatGPT and GPT. And, you know, it'd be interesting, if nothing else, if these lawsuits end up exposing kind of more of the inner workings behind what's going on with these models.
You know, with this time suit, I actually am going to cite TechDirt had this article, which I thought was very insightful. The thing with this time suit is the New York Times is actually itself incredibly guilty of stealing from other journalists. They all the time take somebody else, other outlets' work, and then change the words around and put it up with no attribution, which they say, you know, that's not really plagiarism because they've changed it just enough, which is probably true technically, but that's the
You mean without
exact
independently
thing that they're
reporting it or confirming it in any way, they do that, you're saying?
no Techdirt. They've been tagged with this several times. So there's lots of corrections that ultimately end up at the back of section whatever, where they have admitted to it in the past because they've been caught doing it. And what Techdirt said is, what I thought was really interesting was, given this history, this is a weird can of worms for the New York Times to be trying to open, because OpenAI isn't copying their work. They're reading their work and learning from it and deciding to write its own thing based off of it, which it's hard to see how that's any different than this thing that the Times is notorious for doing. And I'll say, like, it's happened to us at Above the Law. Like, I remember there was a New York Times article several years ago that came out about 9 months after we'd written the same thing, about some internal, inside baseball legal thing that nobody cared about, and they decided to care about it 9 months later. But, you know, you could see that it's not like they copied words we wrote, but, you know, the flow chart of what happened was what we did. Like, they talked to the same people we did, or they went to the same places we did. And, like, it was just kind of a rehash, which isn't copying, but is much more close to what OpenAI's system actually does.
Well, in this particular case, which is why people are saying this one has more meat to it than the other ones, where it goes, who knows, is that they are literally copied. They put together a whole exhibit where they managed to sort of basically like jailbreak it, where word for word it regurgitated verbatim all of it. And OpenAI put out this really interesting or weird, I don't know, whatever, statement afterwards saying memorization is a rare failure of the learning process that we're continually making progress on. Like, it's not supposed to do that. But then they also throw in we expect our users to act responsibly. Intentionally manipulating our models to regurgitate is not an appropriate use of our technology and is against our terms of use, which, I mean, I don't think that our users should be responsible has a lawsuit written all over it. Like, who the hell knows what that means?
What
but no,
I gathered,
this is like pure they're like, oh, this is behind, the prompts were, this is behind a paywall. Can you go in and
Right.
find the first
Yes.
paragraph? Great.
Right.
Can you find the next paragraph? And it was spitting it out word for word.
Yes, they were violating the paywall, and that's obviously a thing to do, to say, like they had access on the inside of paywall. It was a workaround the paywall wall, which, is a problem on its own right. But I don't view that in any way as though they've like plagiarized from them or anything. They were violating they had a backdoor past the paywall, which frankly the New York Times has always had a backdoor around the paywall, which was hit the stop load button before the whole story loads. But yeah, I could see how they would be mad about that, but I don't think I view that as different than a training discussion like some of these others do.
It's not a copyright issue.
Yeah, because they're saying this is the New York Times' article. Here's the second paragraph of it,
Well, no, and that's what I'm saying. That's why this case is different than the others, and it raises more issues than just, hey, they trained on my stuff. That's not okay.
Right.
I'm not saying they're valid arguments. There's just a lot more arguments because that other stuff is in this suit also. It just goes farther because like Isha actually tried to repeat the exercise in both the GPT-4 and in, I think she did it in Bard, in Bing. She did it in Bing, and Bing just didn't do anything. And then originally GPT-4 was doing it, and then they must have wised up because at some point it stopped actually producing the same results. So that sort of suggests that they can tweak things. I don't know. Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, there was way back when the Washington posted the list of sources that were used to train, and I forget whether it was Bard or whatever. It wasn't, it wasn't GPT, but when my blog showed up on that list, and instead of thinking, geez, I'm going to sue them, I was thinking, geez, I'm kind of honored that they bothered to use my blog.
Yeah.
But geez, maybe I should sue them instead. I don't know. All right. Well, that was good. Anything else? We're out of time. That's it. It's Friday afternoon. We can all begin our weekend, and we will be back here next week to talk about whatever the heck happens next week.
2 weeks till legal week, y'all.
Right.
Light a
Gearing up.
candle for me,
And
please.
a month to ABA Tech Show. Just a month to ABA Tech Show, and
Crazy.
see you all there.
Okay.
Have a good weekend.
Bye all.
Okay.